Hello, I'm Angel Feliz, and this is Data Science Learning Community. We are going to cover Chapter 18, Develop Custom Input Widgets. And we're going to integrate new input after defining the template, the page skeleton, the containers like cards. So we're going to learn how to add table action buttons, add new elements like the toggle switch, and also add more interactivity when we select the new tabs. First, we know that this framework, the tablet, has its own button and have a lot of custom style behind it. And by checking the documentation, we can find that if you use the tag button and only use these two classes, button and button primary. Of course, you can change the primary to a different status color. And we're going to see that, but that's really simple. And of course, that's that we're going to work in the part of the styling, but we need to cover now the interactivity part, how it's going to react with Shiny, because a button need to start with 0 and then increments by 1 each time you click it over to have as a normal button in Shiny. And to make that, we don't need to create, our own binding for a button. We can use the one that Shiny already has. And by checking the button, we can see that the binding for action buttons in the find method look for the action button class. So we know now that if we want to use this binding, we need to use that class. If we see the original action button function, this is the source code, it use restore input to get, that incremental one each time you click over. It also use the button class, the button tag, and inside it have the class button default, and action button. That's the class that we need in order to use the binding. So what we need to use is just adapt a little bit this, and basically change the default. The default is the one that we don't need. So we are going to create our own function to define the class. We use the button, we add the action button, that is the part that we need for using the Shiny, and then we create a parameter for the status. If you don't place any status, you just assume that the status is primary. Otherwise, it will add the status as part of the button minus status. So it can be danger, I think, but that's more, we need to check out documentation to know more options about more than the primary color. It also add new parameters to the class for the margin and spacing. And yeah, basically it just use the same structure to the bottom. Data bar, value, and just pass the class here. You also have a width distance here. And basically what he want to show us, like, okay, you have the button on Shiny, but you can have more control over the styling of that button. And you can add more parameters in order that fits what you need in the template, because the template have more options than before Shiny. But you keep the important parts, where you place the value, how you pass the list, the icon, it's almost the same. I think, yeah, run there first. Let's go and run it. Yeah, this is the implementation. They just use the tablet page that we already defined in the last chapter, the body, and inside the body, they define a button. In this button have just the even though this is the ID, they use, I don't know how the author is using the same a class as an ID, but yeah, they want to use that word again, and it's passing the value of the button here to this expression, and it will return value, and it is going to increment. It also add an icon, turns up, and also using the width. And that's it, a really simple one. And we keep the style of the tablet, and we see that it's working. So now we take advantage of the bindings that Shiny already has. Yeah. Now they also have a switch. And if we go again to the documentation, we will see this. We have a tag label, and then you have an input tag with these classes and the type checkout. And they explain also that it's really similar to what Shiny provides, because it also have input and checkout. Of course, this is really important because if we go to the Shiny bindings, we can see that the define method is input type equals checkbox. So, we don't have any problem with using this structure, because Shiny will find it. We find the input and in this part. And basically, we just need to create another function. Also, res value, and we are going to define the label wrapper because we are following the tablet. But the tablet function, we pass the same classes. It shows in the documentation. He also pass some style here. Then he defines the input tag, and also define he wants to apply some, if the value is checked. So yeah, use the checked option inside the input tag. We saw here. Yeah, this is checked. Oh, the button is like this, checked. It's a little bit, oh, maybe it's the same thing. I see that this doesn't, it shows as a value, not as an attribute here. And here is an attribute of the input. In this case, they are passing it as an attribute. So append attributes and is adding checked as Shiny does. And then you just wrap it around the label and pass the input tag and also the spam. That is part of the Shiny part. Oh, spam. I think it's in both cases. No, spam is here. Shiny also have a spam, but doesn't have this class. They are passing with the class. So the point is trying to mimic the HTML here, but keeping the important part for Shiny. And also they say, okay, perfect. We already have a binding. We also can define the update function. But to me, this just for make it user friendly, because at the end, the checkbox should also work. I'm using the checkbox. If I pass the ID of checkbox in my mind, yeah, it doesn't change the function a lot. Just it's the same function. They just define it just because, you you as a user know, oh, this is for switch. I have an option for switch. If we go now we can also run this example. And see how we see that every time you click over switch, it throws a true, false. It's an observer in the Shiny app. And every time you click go also is using the update function. So the update function is working basically. Yeah, here's the what is printing, the observer, and also the button. Every time you click update in the button update, yeah, it will make the switch. So as simple as that, using Shiny inputs is a great way that you can get the same functionality just with a different looking. But they needed also an example to show that you can insert your or input binaries. We already have a chapter for that. And they explain that, okay, maybe you are selecting a tab, but you want that something happens when you select a new tab. And we are going to develop basically a secondary Shiny input, no a primary one, because you are not entering anything, but it's capturing the state of something. So they just they go to the tab nav menu and add the ID here to pass an ID to the tag, and they're going to use the navbal class for the find function in the binary they're going to define. Then the same script that we saw before to show the first tab, we are going to apply in the initialize method. So when you start your Shiny app, it will run this code. What it's doing this is picking the ID of the particular tab, the container tab, and just combining that with the hashtag, so jQuery knows that this is an ID. Then based on that ID, it will find all the elements that have the nav link active. And also the active, because it's like this is a class and this is another class. Okay, I know that I have this nav is active. And he will check whether you have at least one element active. If you have one element active, it will pick the data value attribute, and based on this attribute, it will remove the active from other tabs, and then show and active classes. So basically, it's forcing the tab to show. That was what we were doing last week. And it doesn't have any active, it will just pick the first nav link and just show. And that show is a method from Bootstrap. Basically, we add the activate and here also. It seems like for some reason, at this point, when you have more than one active, show won't have any active class. So that's why it's just making the manual. Maybe as Bootstrap is expecting to see a page, no attack, it's not adding it by default. That's why they active by hand. Now they use the get value just to return the currently selected tag. So every time you are in this tab, that's the information you are going to receive. And they use this menu item. So they are just remember that the menu item have this nav item. Oh no, nav link. So you have in the document, you will find an R class attack that have this nav link because this have this is attack and using this nav link and is also active. So you have a selected tab by definition. And then you just get the name of the tab because you see here, tag name is passing to data value. That's a little bit the logic behind it. Like to write this method, you need to really have your HTML code side by side to know what you are selecting. The set value is to the active based on the bootstrap method. So you have your value, like in this case, value would be the tag that you are going to specify, a new tag that you want to change. So the value is the tag and you are going to add the ID. And based on that, as you can see, you have document, you have attribute ID. And based on the ID you have, you are going to apply the show method again. And that's going to change. And we also want to have an update function. So we define it as a same input message. And we just need to define the receive message method. So once you apply this function, it will send the data to this method and it will just apply the set value to change the tab. And we also need to define the subscribe method that is, when Shiny needs to change, when it needs to apply the changes. And they explain that the best is to pick the last one because it will show the event once the tab is showing to the user. So there won't be confusion. To me, it's a little bit of delay, but maybe his experience is say that it's not, a big problem to pick the last one. Because I thought, oh, maybe you want to pick when you want to hide. It's like the order of the event is this. Like, oh, I want to hide this, and then show this one. And first he hidden the old one, and then he shows the new one. So basically he said, okay, no, pick the last event. So you know that booster already finished, and then you make Shiny to work. And that's the last event he picked for the navbar menu binding. He just applied the callback. And also the unsubscribe function. And then we just need to define our dependencies. And he defines a function to have all his dependencies, like is bootstrap first, then tabler dependencies, and then the tabler custom JavaScript that you need. In the package, we can see how he does that. He's picking the tablet dependency from this link and the bootstrap from this other link. And the other JavaScript code comes directly from the package. Here we can see the navbar binding that we were studying. And also we have another JavaScript progress handlers. And he plays all together here in the dependency function, and then he called it later. And add it as a tag list, like add tablet dependencies, body div, and apply it to the page function, basically. He added as part of the page. And now we have all that. We can basically run the code. He did some interesting things with this binding. Like, okay, every time you change the observation, you are going to update the histogram. That's the only part it makes about the first tab. But every time you switch the tab, please send a notification. Oh, this is the hello tab. This is, as a pop-up that durates 1 second. If people update the click the update button here, update button, change tab, and you are going to send a message. You are going to use the update function basically that we defined before. And now we can see all the functionality together in the UI. We see that histogram updates. And every time we click over a tab, we say hello tag, 1 second. Hello tag 1 and switch. And getting the same results. Basically, that's the stuff functionality he gains by creating the input bindings, because we saw before that just by adding the initial JavaScript, the tasks were working, but that's the benefit of using the secondary input binding. And basically, that was our chapter for this week.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, it was great. Let me just stop.